Good morning, everybody. This is Greg Sizemore. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Construction Users Roundtable, and you are joining the sixth in a series of webinars entitled Construction and Crisis, a Curt Response. The purpose of these webinars is to give you the latest up-to-date information that we feel that you as owners and contractor associates need to know in order to make better, more well-informed, more well-connected decisions. Curt has always asserted that we only have three things that we offer. The first thing is perspective. The second thing are the experiences of us together. And the third are resources that we share and create together. And all in, those are very, very powerful. So that we're glad that you're here. I would like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, the National Center for Construction Education and Research, whose generous contribution helped make these things available at no cost. Thank you, NCCER. I'd like to also take a moment and thank those of you who are CURT members. You know, I think at this time, more than any other time, perhaps in recent CURT memory, we need each other. We need our experiences shared, our perspectives shared, our resources shared, and we need to develop new resources that will help us emerge, not only just survive, but thrive during and after this COVID-19 pandemic. So thank you for your CURT membership. Thank you for your continued support. Also, be advised that the CURT offices are open 9 to 5 every single day, that your calls are being forwarded to our staff who are working remotely, and they are working every day, and it seems in recent weeks longer than a normal day would normally contend, in order to serve you better. If you have any questions at all or any ways that you think that we might be able to help you, please call Rob or Rana. Their cell phones are out there. The CURT.org website has additional information, and certainly call the CURT office and you can reach them through that line of communication as well. I'd like to invite you to stay to the very end, if possible, of this webinar. I've discovered over the course of the last 5 webinars that sometimes the best information comes when we begin to be interactive, and we'll have time for that after Cynthia's presentation. So I'd like to direct your attention to a couple of points that will help us have a better experience. First of all, we think that we have everybody's microphone muted, but double check, make sure your microphone is muted, and make sure your camera is disabled. And what we're going to do is point your attention to the chat box below. If you'll just scroll your cursor over this image, it should pop up a box below, and you should see a little chat box. And you are able to chat with each other privately, one-on-one, or publicly. So we invite you throughout the presentation this morning to use the chat box for any questions that you might have. We have staff who will be monitoring those, as well as our presenter, and we'll take some time at the very end of our webinar together to field those questions. We plan to end right at 12 o'clock. Sometimes we've gone over a minute or two, depending on availability of our presenters and the enthusiastic engagement of our attendees. Now, after this webinar, what you're going to receive by close of business today is a follow-up email. In that email, you'll have the presenter's bio, you'll have the presenter's contact information, you'll have the presenter's full slide deck, you'll have advanced registration for our next Construction and Crisis webinars, as well as other information that you will find useful. I'll also take a moment to mention that we have developed a Construction and Crisis special report. The purpose of this special report is to try to synthesize the tsunami of information that comes in to the industry and for the industry, that we feel that as owners primarily and contractors close second, need to know in order to be a better, more well-informed, well-connected decision maker. If you'd like to subscribe to that, I'm going to ask Greg Palmer to put a link to that subscription in the chat box here in the next moment or two, and I'll invite your attention to it. Feel free to sign up. It is free, and you'll find that very, very useful. Also, we are recording these sessions, and Kyle, if you can make sure that the record function is on. We're recording these sessions in order to make them available to you, or to send out to your team if they couldn't make it to today's webinar. All you have to do is simply ask, and as a member of CURT, we'll get this recording out to you in due course. I'd like to remind you that the next event is this coming Thursday at 11 o'clock, where we'll be featuring wellness strategies primarily for mental and somewhat physical health during the COVID-19 crisis, things that will help you help your team, help yourself, help your family, and certainly help your staff and those you work with in the business. I now am going to introduce to you Dr. Cynthia Tsao. Dr. Tsao is the owner of Navaline LLC. She is out of Boston. She's a longtime personal friend of mine. She's a longtime friend of Kurt, and her presentation today is entitled Leveraging Lean During COVID-19. What's changed, what you need to know, and how Lean can help you make the most of your construction project activity during this season. All the way from Boston, Massachusetts, Cynthia Tsao. Dr. Tsao, thank you so much for joining us. It's all yours.
That this button can't be seen. So good morning, everyone. I want to make sure you can all hear me. All right. And if you can't, you guys should. Greg, please let me know. Okay. So I have a lot of material I'd like to cover. You'll see my ambition. I actually was hoping to cover more material, but because of the time, I could not cover one of the topics. So you'll see it soon. If you are a part of the AGCCM Lean Continuing Lean Certification Program, make sure to email Rana later to qualify for the continuing education credits. Okay. So let's begin. First off, what's really important for all of us as leaders of project teams is to think about what is the mood in your company, what is the mood of your project team members, including PM staff and the field staff. I distinguish the difference between them as the PM staff, they work primarily in the trailer, and the field staff works primarily on site. And especially, what is the mood of your project's construction workers? There's a book by Gloria Flores that I just showed called Learning to Learn in the Navigation of Moods. A lot of lean leaders throughout the country, especially in lean project delivery, are paying attention to this book now because we're trying to figure out how do you get learning to happen on your projects. And in that book, they identify that there are moods that get in the way of learning and moods that are conducive to learning. I would extend that to say that these are moods that get in the way of quality installed work and moods that are conducive to quality installed work. The risk of COVID-19 has introduced these moods to our projects: fear and anxiety, overwhelmment, and a lack of confidence due to the insecurity, the uncertainties that sit out there. All the news, people don't know what's going on, and they're feeling really overwhelmed and fearful of what to expect. I propose that as leaders of project teams, as embodied by the membership of CURT, it is our responsibility to transform, to think about the moods of the project construction workers, especially. I'm based in Boston, and recently an article was said that, this is from our local Boston News, that the construction workers are just waiting to get sick. The construction sites raise concerns in coronavirus pandemic. I'll just read. Basically, there is conflicting information from the governor versus mayors within Boston and Massachusetts. There are risks in keeping going and other risks in stopping. The tension is forcing companies and workers to make some difficult decisions. It goes on to say, for example, they quoted a spouse of one of the construction workers. She says, "My husband is very nervous about bringing illness home. It's hard to keep 6 feet of space between workers on a construction site, as health experts recommend. They are very much afraid." So I want to remind everyone that if we are focused on really, truly doing a lean practices to do to be on the lean journey ourselves and to have our projects be lean. We need to uphold the primary lean principle of respect for people. This book, Transforming Design and Construction, is by the Lean Construction Institute, and we defined in the book that the principles are continuous improvement, removal of waste, generation of value, focus on process and flow to optimize the whole, but most importantly, we need to respect the people. So with that in mind, as leaders of construction projects, it is within our ability to help transform the risk of COVID-19 into an opportunity. We need to help transform these moods into moods of ambition, resolution, confidence, and trust. And to do that, I propose that as leaders, we need to have a message, a universal message to all of our project teams. Keep calm and plan on. This is what I've been trying to promote, that we need to leverage this disruption to improve the planning on our projects. I'm going to talk about 3 main areas, although I have 4 up on the screen. The 4 represents my ambition to try to cover today, but I found that as I developed this presentation, I could only really truly cover 3 topics. So supply chain management is a very rich topic. We can talk about the connection between the supply chain, connecting the supply chain with the work plans and the last planner system that we've been managing, and coordinating across both the supply chain and the last planner system through TACT planning. TACT planning is very popular now in the Lean Construction Institute in many projects, and this can be an entire session in itself. I only have about an hour to cover what we have today. So I wanted to focus on some easy takeaways that you guys could walk away with, potentially implementing immediately. So first, I'm going to talk about work shifts. During the crisis, I propose that you make your project the job of choice. And why is that the case? It's because all projects are strained right now. There are essential projects that are allowed to continue partially to do emergency work. There are some essential projects that are healthcare projects, so they're allowed to continue. But they are all struggling to find workers willing to work. Why is that the case? Because of that mood of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety in the market force. So I propose that you make your project the job site of choice by operating with a 36-hour work week. To do that, you can use 4 9s or 3 12s, and I'm just going to go over that very simply. 4 9s with 2 shifts. Your first shift is from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. Your second shift is from 3:30 to 12:30 a.m., and then you maintain a safety buffer from 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Projects are large and small, tight or not tight in terms of space for people to work or not. As an example, I have one of my projects, there's 500 workers on any given day. So if you really want to maintain safety for our workers, and you want to break your 500 workers into maybe 300 workers during the first shift and 200 during the second shift, how can you safely allow the workers to move on and off site with no window, with no safety buffer? So if you want to have 300 people come off the site and 200 people come onto the site safely, then I suggest you have a 30-minute buffer in between at the very least. But with this, you can get 72 production hours a week. That's 4 9s with 2 shifts. 3 12s allow us to think about you're operating the job site already, and you can have 6 active work days. So 3 12s will have 12-hour shifts, and you will have, I'm sorry, I'm not going to, Greg, just speak up if I have to address any questions. It's a 12-hour shift, and you can have group 1 workers work on days 1, 3, and 5, and group 2 workers work on days 2, 4, and 6. This also allows you to have 72 production hours a week. But what this does is it allows workers, instead of, for example, you're moving from 5 days of work weeks to 4-day work weeks for the workers. So you help reduce their amount of exposure potentially to their families. And with 312s, then you go from 4 days now to 3 days that they are on site. Another way to think about it is if you want to operate the job site 6 days a week, you could have 4 9s with 2 shifts and 3 groups. So, for example, you could have group 1 work on days 1, 2, 3, and 4 right here, right? Group number 2 could be offset by 2 days, and they work these days. And perhaps you might have group number 3 work like this. And why would we set it up like that is just so that perhaps there's a creative way for you to manage the parade of trades. You could have trade 1, trade 2, trade 3 follow each other to maintain the flow in production. And with this, you can get 108 production hours a week. But as you ask workers to come on site, what else can we do? We need to ask workers to respect the job site by cleaning it daily and keeping it clean. This will be especially important for COVID-19 to prevent the spread of it. So a clean job site is a productive job site. We all know that. If you walk job sites and you see it's very clean, chances are it's very well run as well. I'm not going to go into details of 5S, but 5S is a lean technique that we can all use. There are many resources online to improve people's efforts to understand 5S, to sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And one mantra is clean it as you go. Keep the job site clean. So let's think about how we might integrate this 5S effort into these work shifts. When is there time to clean? Well, I propose that maybe at a shift start, you should devote your first 40 minutes of the shift to stretch and flex and a safety toolbox talk. There's been talk about reducing the amount of safety toolbox talks that are all in one room, so you can be delivering maybe all these stretch and flex and safety toolbox talks virtually, so people can do that in their own safe space. And then allow them to focus on pre-task planning and disinfecting their tools in their workspace before they begin their shift. And at the shift end, during the last 40 minutes, ask the workers to reflect and disinfect. Now, why would we do that? 40 minutes at the end, because we have to remember the other primary lean principle, which is continuous improvement. During reflect and disinfect, ask your workers to pause and reflect daily on what is working well that we should keep doing, what is not working well that we should change, how can we make those changes, and who will be responsible for those changes. If you give your workers time to reflect on this and implement changes to make their workday better, you will, in essence, get the help of all your construction workforce to continuously improve the processes and therefore the productivity and the quality on your projects. Since I didn't have time to really cover supply chain work with the connecting of supply chain to last planner system and managing it via TAC planning, I was just going to share there is many resources online for creating a leaner supply chain, and I've included one for you guys to take a look later on your own. But I'm now going to go into the last planner system because that is the foundation of our world. The last planner system is the building blocks, and I think most of you who have done any basic intro to lean construction should have known about the elements of the last planner system, from master planning to phase pull planning, make-ready planning, weekly commitment planning, and learning. And the top two defines what should be done. Make-ready planning defines what can be done. Weekly commitment planning defines what will be done. And daily learning is what did we do, okay? At the highest level, now that we've had we have to think about, as project leaders, how do we help lead properly for our project? For example, this is just a simplistic way to say, there are different workflows and we have different milestones on a typical project. But now we've had COVID-19 impact us. And the question is, are we able to change the end date? My experience on most of my project is no, the end date doesn't change. So as a result, we have to deal with suddenly now we have to figure out how to have multiple workflows happening at the same time. I have been involved in a number of large projects in which you have anywhere from upwards from 8 to 12 different superintendents managing different work areas and workflows. And I have observed that these superintendents are arguing and fighting over the workers of the trades. The foremen are being pulled in different directions by the different superintendents saying, my workflow is the most important, do my work. So you're going to have this confusion on the part of our trade partners. So as leaders, if this is the case that we have to live within, that the end date doesn't change and now we have to manage multiple workflows, help your project team, be the leader and guide for them. Figure out what are the priorities. I know everything's important, but if I had to make a choice, what is priority? Which workflows should be priority? It is your role as project leaders to help your project team define that. So it's not allowed the loudest superintendent to fight for the priority. It should be defined by what you think is important to enable your project to be successful. At the phase pull planning level, right, there's always this mantra to go slow to go fast. If we plan the work well, we will execute as planned. But why do we constantly have difficulty executing work as planned? Because work plans can always be improved with better work task definitions, the scope, crew sizes and durations, work sequencing, buffers of space over time. This is especially important now to maintain the proper social distancing in COVID-19. Better handoffs between the trade partners, well-defined handoffs, and how to do work leveling to enable attack planning, to smooth out the workflow, to enable flow by most trades, to enable one-piece flow. And again, if we plan well, we will execute as planned. And what's very helpful for us now is that there are many cloud-based online tools that enable you to do this. So instead of pushing workers to be on site to get work done that's not well planned, how about if you allow some of the workers, especially your foremen, to work from home and use these cloud-based tools and work with your project team, your superintendents, your project managers to improve the work plans through all these elements, right? Take the time now to pause and plan well. I'm going to now talk about make-ready planning. I'm using this one approach to last planner system implementation is to use 6 or 8 board method, in which you put, you have 8 boards, 6 to 8 boards on the wall representing each of the weeks, and you have sticky notes, your proverbial sticky notes on each of the boards. And as you guys go through the week, once this week is over, you take this week off and you move it to the end of the line and you shift all the boards over, for instance. And I'm just using it as an example. In make-ready planning, it's important that there are no roadblocks in week 1. And unfortunately, some projects still struggle to do this. So now that you've got this disruption from COVID-19, you're limited in how much work you can do on site, why don't you first work on figuring out if your project is put on hold, once the project begins, how can you make it so that week 1 will happen without a problem because there are no roadblocks? Find out each and every way to remove those roadblocks. Ideal practice in general would say you need to have the next 2 weeks of your work plan have no roadblocks, and you can work towards that. I propose that during the COVID-19 disruption, if your project is temporarily on hold, work with the project managers and the superintendents to figure out what are the work plans to figure out how to remove the roadblocks for the next 4 weeks so that once project is allowed to begin again and you have the floodgates open, you're able to work through at least 4 weeks and then stay on top of, remember, keeping the last 2 weeks, next 2 weeks worth of roadblocks removed, right? So this will take a lot of planning. And how do you keep the every 2 weeks of work removed roadblocks? You need to be planning, sort of working with your supply chain and figuring out how to get the materials delivered at a rate to match the rate of delivery to match the rate of installation. Now, when we get to weekly commitment planning, I really enjoyed last Thursday's webinar. They had a good photo showing setting up mannequins to help workers remember what staying 6 feet and 2 meters apart means. But what work zones would ensure social distancing between our trade partners? Perhaps, for example, it's by column lines. This is just an example, a sample, maybe a commercial project or whatever kind of project you're talking about. But maybe if workers stayed between column lines A and B, and then B and C, C and D, D and E, that's the type of social distancing that we need. And then what you can do then on those boards, for instance, is identify those column lines. So when people are planning, when your foremen are planning their weekly commitment plans, they can see that people will be properly social distanced. With learning, we could say that there are work tasks on that board, right? These are all the sticky notes, right? And perhaps, remember, we have the challenge now. We may have 2 shifts, 3 shifts maybe happening going on, and perhaps maybe it's only during the first shift that you have the foremen who are creating the work plan. So how do you clearly pass on the information to the subsequent trades in the subsequent shifts of what work is happening versus not, and to figure out what work should be worked on? Well, maybe what you need to do is with this work plan established on the boards, you can have a clear indicator of, on each work task, ways to indicate the progress along the line. So for instance, and I'm talking about I would call it just a tangible sticky note, right? And you can do this virtually too with your cloud-based systems, but I'm just sort of trying to illustrate this and the part of your proverbial sticky note. Maybe a sticky note with no indicator on it means that the task is planned, right? And as a part of that pre-task planning process, during the first 40 minutes of the workday, you need to have foremen identify tasks that are in progress, and they can do that by using a Sharpie marker and drawing a box around the work task, right? That would indicate that the work is in progress. Then, once they are complete with the work, it's the foreman's task to mark a line across to indicate that the work is complete. Maybe then you could have a quick spot check by someone to say, from your project team, to say work is confirmed, right? But then if the next trade is going to work on it, and they are able to work on it, then you could ask them to fill in the first quadrant, say the next trade has approved that work. One way to ensure built-in quality is to empower your workers to say, if I was handed off work from the trade before me and that work was not quality, I will not work on it, right? If you have that kind of behavior on a project, you will have better quality because you don't want workers to work off of low-quality work, low-quality handoffs. So if you ask the foreman to say, yeah, I worked off of that work, then that shows next trade was approved. Then maybe you might have a part of your quality program, maybe you might have the superintendents check in and go, yep, I approved that. And then maybe you have a quality program as well, quality approve. And then maybe the last bit is punch list approve. I'm just illustrating ways in which people can very quickly, visually, with transparency, show the status of the work plan on site in a very dynamic nature, for instance. So that covers elements of the last planner system. One thing that came up in the earlier presentation was, where do we get the materials? I want to mention that one of my former employers, Consigli, was able to partner with a distillery to get producing much needed hand sanitizers, so that's something that you might consider. And with that, I want to remind you guys that email Rana if you want to qualify for the AJCCM Lean Continuing Education credits. And I do want to mention that I am currently working via a nonprofit to develop an open source COVID-19 solutions for rapid expansion of healthcare facilities. We are literally coordinating our work right now, and we are declaring that for the AEC industry to be effective during the COVID-19 crisis, the community must rapidly learn from each other to implement the best regulatory, design, supply chain, and construction solutions to rapidly expand the capacity of healthcare facilities to meet the demand created by COVID-19. Now, this is definitely geared in the healthcare field, but I wanted to make you aware of it in case you or others or people that you know might benefit from this resource. We are developing it, and right now we will be opening up online soon on a Facebook group to help connect people with the resource, people who need help with rapid expansion of healthcare facilities and people who have solutions for it. Right now you could follow us on Twitter, or you can connect with me via LinkedIn. I'll be announcing more about this via LinkedIn. So I wanted to allow plenty of time for questions. I'm going to turn it over to Greg Sizemore to start and to see if there's any out the door.
Yeah, pardon me. Yes, thank you, Cynthia, very much for that presentation. There are a couple that have come in via text and other sources, as well as the one that's on the screen there. One on the screen asks, what makes a 36-hour work week a preferred place to work when construction workers are typically after that overtime? Are you paying them for 40 hours a week on 36? Care to comment on that?
Yes, you are paying for 40 hours with the 36. And this I want to clarify. I'll go back to that slide. Let's find it.
And by the way, while she's looking, please ask your questions on the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen. If you'll just put your cursor over the image of her slides right now, or my face, whatever you're looking at, it should pop up on the bottom, and you can ask those questions on your chat box. And I'm also getting some via text as well here.
Oops. So, sorry, my Wi-Fi is reconnecting. But to that point, yes, I'm proposing that during the crisis period, I'm not saying that this is a permanent thing. I'm saying during the crisis period that I'm advocating that projects will say you'll be paid for a 40-hour work week, but you'll be expected to work for 36 hours. Because I do know, right, that all projects are scrambling that are currently trying to operate right now. They're all scrambling to try to get workers. On one of my projects, they went from 110 plumbers to 65 to about 40, and now they're out 30. And they need more than 30 to do the emergency operations. So it's a...
Uh-oh, did we lose Cynthia?
You know?
Yep, there we go.
I'm back.
You're good.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, you're good.
So did you hear that comment? So
we did not. Go ahead.
It's a struggle. Okay, so what I was saying was it's a struggle right now to get the workers. I know some of my projects that are currently still in progress right now with a emergency situation, they are struggling to find workers right now, right? So absolutely, it's only, and I want to specify, this is during the crisis, operating with a 36-hour work week but paying for 40.
Got it. Another question
another
go
thing
ahead.
I wanted to clarify is normally during normal times, I propose that projects pick and use lean, because what we need to do is we need to say to the workers and to our trade partners, when we ask you to come to on-site to do work, when we ask you to mobilize and get on-site, we are ready for you. And one of the most common complaints by foremen is that we ask them to hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. And that is a real problem, because we ask our trade partners to hurry up and wait. They wait, and then they demob. They're like, you weren't ready for me, right? So in normal times, I propose that general contractors and construction managers make their projects the job site of choice, because when we ask them to come to the job site, we are ready for them. And we also, through working of balancing the workflow and TAC planning, we create smooth, continuous workflow to allow different trades all to flow. If you ask a foreman, is work flowing for you? They very much know if it's flowing for them or not. They like projects that help them flow through the spaces.
Gotcha. Thank you, Cynthia. Another question has come in is, what are the major risks or possible disruptions on projects that started lean and at some point during their duration were interrupted by the COVID-19? What are the most likely derailment risks?
Well, lean, and for example, especially doing the last planner system and sticking with it, it is not easy to do. I think I had been re-quoted back to myself by one of past clients. They like to, apparently I said before, lean is the hardest simple thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to drop the ball and just say, oh, it's not working. You have to, as leaders, keep people focused and focus on continuing working on the work plan and tracking the work plan, updating the work plan. What's important is that we all, as between our project teams and our trade partners, we need to have an alignment on the state of the state on the job site. And the COVID-19 can throw your project in disarray, because now everyone feels that there's panic mode and everybody's worried. What's important, especially if your projects have been doing lean, is to remind people to stay with the discipline of lean. Do the weekly commitment planning, even though you don't get much work done now. Limit, train your foremen to reduce their promises to be more realistic. This is definitely important for you guys to impart on your project team members, to focus on realistic work plans as opposed to optimistic. Optimistic work plans results in handoffs not being able to be completed, and that throws your project into further disarray.
That's a great tee up for the next question that I have here. Someone asks, okay, how do you drive alignment with the vendors, and how do you keep them from jumping the tracks? What's the best way to communicate and be realistic versus optimistic with them as well?
Right.
Because all these projects have tons of vendors. Comments?
Thank you for that question, because that allows me to actually start addressing this. Let me see if I can get it right. Right here, right? The supply chain, right? This is actually, I wanted to spend more time on it, and I'm glad I have to do it. So if you think about it, the problems that we have on site in terms of getting our construction workers on site to even install the work, our manufacturers are experiencing the same problems of having they have to, in the same way that we have to re-envision what's the right way to manage social distancing so people can work and be safe, to have right time buffers or space buffers to prevent people from having a lot of contact with each other. The fabrication plants will have to do the same. They have to figure out how might they manage the shifts, how might they organize the people. And so I think that it would be really important to think about this. Instead of demanding that your vendors flood your job site with all the materials and to waste your effort to warehouse everything. Figure out if you can find ways to, figure out you can manage multiple workflows, but make sure if you can figure out how to do one-piece flow. If you can do one-piece flow from the factory to your job site, right? One-piece flow, so they fabricate, they deliver, and when they deliver to the job site, you install immediately. That is valuable, right, because you install it. If you flood your job site with a whole bunch of materials, now you're going to have to spend a whole bunch of other effort to move and remove the material until it finally gets installed. A good policy is to say you need to install whatever materials you deliver to site within 3 work days. So day 1, you deliver the material, and you have day 2 and day 3 to install it. You need to keep your job site uncluttered, and if you can work with your vendors to just constantly devote a steady rate of production on their production line to your job site, and just say, just give me, 5 floors a week or whatever, because you're on your site. You can only install 5 floors a week. You need to match the rate of delivery from the vendors to the rate of install.
Thanks,
Does that
Cynthia.
address the question, you think, Greg?
Yes, I think it does. Yes, and by the way, if the audience has questions, use your chat box. Another one that's come up: have you seen studies for the safe radius of a worker to maintain social distancing on projects without having to utilize the mitigation equipment, the PPE, masks, face shields, etc.?
That I have not seen.
Okay.
That I have not seen. I think that's a very interesting question, though. And there may be some ways for us to think about some creative ways to also shield workers, for instance. Is there ways to introduce the kinds of temporary wall structures to block areas or create a safe place so workers can work unimpeded, for instance? That I have not seen yet.
Thank you. Another question that came in via text, and that is, with the worker shortage on that one site, and assuming you're going to bring workers on who are unfamiliar with Lean, what is the best way to reassemble the project team, assuming that the original team that went out the back door when the project was put on hold will not be the same team that shows up again? So let's assume for a moment there's a Lean project, and the Lean team was aware, and now you have newcomers to the team.
Right.
What impact do those newcomers have, and how do we best mitigate their negative impact or fast forward them for success? Thoughts?
It brings me back to this is why I'm trying to industry-wide provide this message to have good work plans, right? If you had a good work plan in place, right? Excuse me, I'll get to the work plan slide. Right? If you have a good work plan, and the team that created that work plan suddenly are not available, and now you have new workers, and that work plan you feel is solid, then it's merely then to help get the new workers familiar with the work plan, understand it, give them a chance to also debate it, to refine it and to improve it themselves, right? And it's important that you can say to them, this is what the last team did. What do you guys think? Can we improve it anyway? Can we structure it this way? What will prevent us from? What would prevent you from following this work plan? And to monitor it closely on a day-by-day basis, right?
Yes, and I do see a response that came in from one of our listeners. AMA now says that under right condition, droplets from sneezing and coughs can travel 26 feet and then linger in the air for a number of minutes. I also heard Dr. Fauci say that he thought it was more like 3 feet, but nevertheless, I think there has to be some reasonable standard that emerges as a result of this in preparation for perhaps our next pandemic.
And this may require us, Greg, right, to really be creative in how we manage airflows on our job site, right? For instance, if you have the temp systems in place, or if you have movement of air through your temporary duct systems, then start figuring out ways to maintain a laminar flow. So air comes in and it flows out, out the building, for instance, just the way a hospital is set up, right? That there's a laminar flow. The airflow comes in from maybe the ceiling and leaves down near the floor, and maybe that's something that we need to also consider doing on our job sites if that 26 feet is indeed the case.
Another question that's come in is on what particular aspect of lean project delivery that you think new best practices or new ways of doing things may emerge? Where are we likely to see a new and improved version of how we do lean, given what we're learning now? Thoughts on that? I know it's crystal ball stuff.
I think that TAC planning is going to be the key to help us illustrate the way for us to organize the rate at which our factories are feeding the job site, the rate. One thing I like to coach project teams to think about is, can you match the rate of install with the rate of delivery, with the rate of shop drawing approval, which means the rate of design completion, which matches the rate of decisions on the part of the owner, right? If you organize and match all those things well, right, you have a smoothness on the job site, a constant flow, right? And I think that this.
Did we lose Cynthia there for a moment? Cynthia, if you can hear us, we're,
Right?
I think there you
back.
go.
Sorry,
yeah, how about the last comment? No, you're okay.
I'm just saying that COVID will definitely emphasize the importance of tact to organize and clarify and make transparent that we are matching the rate of decision making to the rate of design development to the rate of fabrication to the rate of installation on the job site. This is key for us all.
Great. Another question is, what resources or outside resources as a lean consultant are you monitoring in order to stay up to date with new developments? Where should we be looking? You mentioned the AGC thing, for example.
Yeah, the AGC has a lean construction certification program. By all means, pay attention to Lean Construction Institute. They are offering online courses, I believe, and we are also just constantly connecting with each other. At this time, especially now that a lot of people are working from home, take a chance to sort of think about who can I connect with and who can I learn more from, and go for a deeper dive. I love webinars and I love online seminars and stuff like that, but this is just it's just a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to go for a deep dive, connect with somebody, learn from somebody. Ask them, could I have a 20-minute conversation with you so I can learn a little bit more about how you manage let's say the daily check-ins. I'm always glad to connect people with different people. Our network is very tight. We know who has more insight in some facets of lean versus others, for instance. I would always be happy to connect people with others.
Terrific. Also, we have a Lean Summit coming up for CURT members in May. I'm going to ask Greg Palmer in his end-of-day summary of this webinar to also include information on that virtual seminar. Joe Gianfrido, whom you know very well, Cynthia, is producing that for us. Joe's formerly global construction manager with P&G, Procter & Gamble, and he's done a great job of pulling some great resources together. So we'll send information out to you about that event as well. Checking the chat box to make sure there is nothing remaining. There's one more question that came in, and it is this. How much time on average will you take to do a ROI or a cost-benefit analysis of lean during crisis? Do we take a new approach now to measuring how effective it is or how disruptive it might be? I know this is crystal ball stuff, Cynthia, but you're very, very educated with respect to lean and its application. Any thoughts to how this changes, if at all, the ROI or the cost benefit analysis of lean during crisis, if you will?
Well, one of the things that I've always been interested in is the metrics to say, you know, are the lean results compelling enough to compel people to do lean? And Greg Howell, my good mentor and friend, once time said to me, Cynthia, Cynthia, results never convince people to really do things. And there is a tremendous body of work in the International Group for Lean Construction with tremendous number of case studies illustrating the value. And there are many articles and reports I know from Construction Industry Institute as well, illustrating the benefits of the impact of lean in terms of project performance. I would suggest that maybe now is the time for us to track that information, right? Of what is the ROI, and the ROI is you know, it's also about quality, right? Did people have to redo work or not? I mean, if we push too hard, you'll have poor quality workers doing poor quality work, and then you're going to have to redo the work later on. This is very expensive, and this is what I'm trying. That's why I'm trying to help us focus on getting, you know, good quality workers, giving them the time to do the work right the first time, right? By not building on poor handoffs from the previous trades, for instance. But I think it's a very good question right now about COVID impacts, but I think maybe we're in the midst of it right now.
Right.
Maybe we should be measuring it to see what the
that's a good
impact
point. So let me clarify something. Did Greg, and he's a great friend, great pioneer for lean and construction, did he tell you that the results will never be that
truly
which
convince
convinces?
People. It won't convince a person to do lean.
And what will? It will or will not? I'm sorry.
It will not. It will not.
Okay. So what will?
Results
I think
do
I'm a
not
little
convince.
confused in that.
It's really, it's because we've been working for 20 years to provide the results, and the results are pretty straightforward to us, right? It's pretty compelling. Any type of project, any size, scale, we've seen successful lean implementation. But really, it's back down to what I started this presentation about: is the mood. Is there a mood of ambition on the project leaders to get better? Is there a mood to respect the workers? Is there a mood for continuous improvement? If there is, then lean is almost a no-brainer. Lean is sort of the operating system, the principles, and the way we function to get to that, right?
It goes hand in hand with this last comment that came in. The attendee says, this is perfect timing to pause and reflect on what's been going well over the last several months with our projects and re-energize that respect for people, which is what I think you're talking about when you're talking the mood of the project.
Right, because I can say this. I've seen plenty of project teams go through the motions of lean in the last planner system. Going through the motions is not enough. It's about really respecting the workers and doing continuous improvement. Right?
So for those of you who are,
important.
I'm sorry, yes, exactly. And so for those of you who are joining us and have joined us for this, maybe a good time to introduce lean as a way to fast forward or mobilize projects once the pandemic has passed through our society and our land. It might be a good time to introduce lean as a way to get things going again, cost optimization, and take an opportunity to drive that respect for quality and for its people. I want to take just a moment and thank Cynthia for taking time out of what I know is a very busy day to give us very good information. And just as a wrap up, we will be sending to you by end of business today a follow-up email which will contain Cynthia's bio, Cynthia's contact information, this complete slide deck, as well as how to get the recording, as well, and other resources, advanced registration for our next event. Our next event is this Thursday, and it's somewhat related and very important. Chris Corbett, who is a director with Atlas Injury Prevention Services and a friend of Kurt, is going to bring a presentation at 11 o'clock Thursday on wellness strategies that you can incorporate for you and your team during this crisis. To register for that, there'll be a link in the follow-up email. Feel free to send it out to others in your organization. These webinars are free, and the recordings are available to you upon request to also send out to your network or your project team. If you have continued questions, and I see a few maybe coming in here, we'll make sure that Cynthia gets those and you get your question answered. Again, we want to thank you for joining us during this hour. It's been terrific. Cynthia, thank you once again. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. We'll see you on Thursday.